Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something huge, a story that, honestly, it forces you to think hard about trust, about allegiance.
hmm
We're heading straight into Genesis chapter 22, the story of Abraham and Isaac on Mount Moriah. And the big question for this deep dive, the thing we're wrestling with, is this. How do you possibly reconcile total trust in a godly character with a command that seems to just fly in the face of every promise you've ever been given?
That's the core tension, isn't it?
Mm,
That gap between what was promised and what's being asked right now, that's where the real weight of this whole narrative sits.
yeah.
So our mission, really, in this deep dive, is to unpack this specific test. We need to figure out if, for Abraham, the relationship itself, his connection with God, was more valuable, more precious than even the amazing gifts of the future that God had promised him.
And what a gift. I mean, Isaac, the miracle son, the promise, the whole future lineage, after decades of waiting
Heck,
to get that and then be asked to give it back, it's just shocking when you read it.
it is. And that's the theme we're tracing today, this necessity of surrendering the thing you treasure most. But crucially, we'll see that God's intention wasn't ultimately about loss. It was about proving something,
Okay.
testing that ultimate allegiance.
Okay.
He often tests our treasures, to make sure he remains the greatest one.
Hmm.
So let's dive right in at the start of Genesis chapter 22. Verse 1 sets the stage immediately. It says, "After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, 'Abraham.' And he said, 'Here I am.'"
Right away, that phrase, God tested Abraham, you just know this isn't business as usual. That word tested, it carries so much weight here, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The Hebrew word is nisa. And understanding this is key because it tells you what kind of event this is from the outset.
Okay.
And nisa isn't some random punishment, and it's not meant to destroy. It's more like an examination, a proving. Its purpose is revelation.
Think of like a metallurgist heating gold just to see how pure it is.
Okay, so God wasn't trying to find out something he didn't already know. Exactly. It wasn't for his information. It seems it was more about establishing the genuineness of Abraham's faith and relationship, maybe for Abraham himself, and certainly for everyone who would read this story later.
Then comes the command itself in Genesis chapter 22, verse 2. And the way it's phrased is just chilling. God doesn't just say sacrifice your son, he layers it. It feels like he's deliberately turning the screw, making sure Abraham feels the full weight of it.
It's incredible writing, really. It pinpoints the exact target of this test with these three intensifying phrases. God says, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love."
Wow. Yeah, that layering, it feels designed to break you. First, just your son. Okay. Then your only son, Isaac. That phrase, ben yachid in Hebrew, right? The unique one, the irreplaceable one.
Precisely. I mean, Abraham did have Ishmael, but Isaac was the child of the promise, the designated covenant heir. Calling him the only son here emphasizes Isaac's unique status. He is Abraham's future, according to the promise.
So if Isaac goes,
The whole promised future just collapses. And then that last clause, that incredibly personal phrase, "whom you love," Asher Ahafta,
yeah.
that just drives home the emotional cost. God isn't asking for an object, a possession. He's asking for the very center of Abraham's human love, the one thing perhaps that could even compete with his love for God, the giver of that gift.
And it requires action, too. That word take, Kash. It sounds like Abraham has to physically do this himself. No delegating the hard parts.
No, this is personal. He has to grasp, prepare, carry it out. And the destination is loaded with meaning, too.
Cool.
Go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you.
Moriah, that rings a bell.
It should. Because history tells us this very region, Mount Moriah, is where Solomon's temple would have eventually be built.
Whoa.
Yeah. So there's this hint, maybe, of a deeper connection, a prophetic link between this ultimate act of surrender and the future place of ultimate worship, and, interestingly, provision.
And the type of sacrifice, the olah, the burnt offering, that wasn't like other sacrifices where maybe the person offering got to eat some of it, right?
That's a crucial point. Absolutely right. The olah meant complete consumption by fire. It symbolized total, absolute surrender. Everything goes up to God. It signifies God's complete ownership.
So not just a token offering.
Not at all. God wasn't asking for, a percentage of Abraham's blessings. He was demanding the surrender of the blessing itself, the whole thing.
Okay, but here's where it gets just mind-bending. How could Abraham, who's lived by these godly promises for, decades?
Decades, yeah.
How could he square this command with the promise that the covenant, everything would continue through Isaac? It sounds like God is breaking his own promise.
And that's precisely why the test is so profound. That tension is supposed to be there. It's meant to be felt. Abraham is forced to hold two seemingly contradictory ideas at the same time. God promised the future through Isaac, and God is now commanding Isaac's death.
So how do you resolve that?
The only way is through a faith that trusts God's fundamental character more than the immediate confusing circumstances. The test was laser-focused on the thing Abraham treasured most, the living embodiment of the promise,
I see.
to see if the relationship with God himself, the giver, was more important than the gift. That's the key insight. The test was designed to prove that the giver mattered more than the promise he gave.
Okay, so given how massive this demand is, the emotional toll, the theological nightmare you'd expect Abraham to, I don't know, take some time, agonize, argue maybe.
You might think so.
But the text in Genesis chapter 22, verse 3, it just says, so Abraham rose early in the morning, like immediately.
That phrase, vashkem in Hebrew, rose early, it's significant. It signals immediate action. There's no record of them hesitating, arguing, trying to bargain, not even waking Sarah to talk it over.
Right.
This immediate, almost stark obedience to this terrifying godly command suggests he'd already reached a resolution in his heart. He processed the horror and still chose to act right away.
And it wasn't just, okay, I agree in principle. He gets practical. He saddled his donkey and took two of his young men with him and his son Isaac, and he cut the wood for the burnt offering.
Yeah, that practical preparation often gets skipped over, but it speaks volumes. The text specifically notes he cut the wood via vac.
He did it himself.
He personally handled the most difficult part of the preparation, the fuel for the fire that was meant for his son. It shows his faith wasn't just mental agreement. It involved taking the necessary, painful physical steps. He didn't just nod. He actively prepared for its greatest potential loss.
So faith isn't passive.
Not at all. It's active trust, resulting in active preparation, even when it's devastating.
And then there's the journey, 3 days. Can you imagine the silent 3 days walking, knowing what you're going to do?
The psychological weight must have been immense. 72 hours walking side by side with your son, carrying this secret, while Isaac is just trusting his dad. That time, that silence, it forces Abraham to essentially recommit to his obedience with every step.
Yeah.
And when they finally see the place from a distance, Abraham tells the servants to wait. He takes only Isaac. It becomes intensely private, just father and son walking toward this dreadful appointment.
And that leads to that absolutely heartbreaking exchange in Genesis chapter 22, verses 7 and 8. Isaac, maybe carrying the wood by this point, asks that simple, innocent question. My father, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?
It's just, Isaac's complete trust is laid bare there. He assumes there is lamb because they're doing what they always do when they worship with his father. He's the picture of trusting innocence walking towards the altar.
And Abraham's answer, it's more than just trying to reassure his son, isn't it? He says, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son, Elohim Jireh.
Yes, that phrase, Elohim Jireh, God will provide. It feels profoundly prophetic in this context. It's not just a hopeful guess or trying to dodge the question. Knowing what we know about Abraham's understanding of the promise through Isaac,
Right.
This sounds like deep, settled confidence in God's character. Abraham seems to believe one of two things. Either God will intervene directly, or God will somehow fulfill the promise even after death, perhaps through resurrection. He's obeying the command, but he's simultaneously trusting the integrity of the God who gave the command.
So he acts on the command, but believes the command can't possibly be the final word because of the promise.
That's the paradox he's living in. And that section closes with this short, incredibly powerful phrase, so they went both of them together. Shinahem Yakdav.
Both of them together.
Despite the awful knowledge Abraham carried, they walked in unity. There's no mention of struggle, which has led many traditions to emphasize Isaac's willing participation, his own trust in his father and his father's God.
Wow. So the big takeaway here is true faith means acting immediately, practically, getting up early, cutting the wood, but also holding on to this unwavering confidence in God's goodness and his ultimate plan, even when it makes absolutely no sense in the moment.
That's it, exactly. Obedience combined with trust in the commander's character.
So the journey's over. They arrive at the place God showed them, and the tension is just ratcheted up to the absolute maximum. Genesis chapter 22, verse 9 tells us what happens next. Abraham arrives, and the first thing he does, Vaven Mizbeach, he built an altar.
Think about that. Even now, at the very edge of the unthinkable, the practice of worship continues. Dedication. He doesn't falter. He prepares the place for the sacrifice.
He builds the altar, lays the wood, and then comes the part that gives this whole event its name, the Akedah.
Right. The binding. Abraham bound Isaac, his son. Now, commentators often point out Isaac was likely a young man by this time, strong enough to resist if he chose to.
So the binding wasn't necessarily about overpowering a small child.
Probably not. It's often seen as a necessary ritual preparation for the olah, the burnt offering, something Isaac possibly submitted to willingly, trusting his father. It completes the picture of surrender.
And then the final awful moment, Genesis chapter 22, verse 10. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son, Vaishlach. He reached out.
We have to pause there. Just absorb the precision of the timing. God lets this test go to the absolute final second. Abraham doesn't just think about it. He doesn't just agree to it. He physically reaches out. He takes the knife. The commitment, the surrender, is complete in his heart and in his action.
He's gone all the way.
All the way. It's only at that precise moment when the surrender is demonstrably absolute that God steps in.
And the intervention is sudden, dramatic, Genesis chapter 22, verses 11 and 12. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him.
The command is halted. The test is over. And the reason, the result, is declared immediately. For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your only son from me.
Okay, let's unpack that phrase, fear God, Yer Elohim. Because in modern English, fear often sounds like being terrified, which feels kind of opposed to a loving relationship.
That's a really important clarification, yes. In this context, Yer Elohim isn't about cowering and terror. It's about profound reverence, deep awe, respect, and crucially demonstrated loyalty and devotion. Abraham's actions just proved that he held God in the absolute highest regard.
So it's about priority, allegiance.
Exactly. He showed he was willing to honor God's command even above his most profound human love and the future God himself had promised.
And that confirmation, you have not withheld. L'chasakta. That seals it.
It confirms the totality of the surrender. He held nothing back. He was willing to give up the foundation of his entire future, the promise itself.
So the big insight here is that the intervention shows God's mercy. He wanted the willingness, the trust, the allegiance, but not the actual loss. The test proves Abraham's heart was fully surrendered.
Perfectly put. The test concludes by proving Abraham trusted God even more than he loved God's most precious gift.
Okay, so the tension breaks. Isaac is spared. The test is passed. What happens immediately next? Abraham's focus shifts. Genesis chapter 22, verse 13 says, Abraham vayisa einav, he lifted up his eyes, and right there he sees the answer.
Instantly. The provision is right there, confirming God was never intending for Isaac to die. The text says, Behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by its horns.
Caught in a thicket.
Yes, Niyashes Basfak. That detail, caught by its horns. It suggests this wasn't just a random sheep wandering by. It was providentially trapped, prepared, waiting. It shows God's provision wasn't a last-minute reaction. It was already in place, waiting for the test of faith to be completed.
And then Abraham offers the ram as the burnt offering instead of his son. That phrase, instead of, that feels huge.
It is huge. The Hebrew word is takshar. This is where the foundational principle of substitution is established so dramatically. A life provided by God dies in the place of the one who was under the sentence of death, so to speak.
Life for life.
Exactly. It sets this massive precedent for how God will ultimately restore relationship with humanity. A substitute takes the place.
And recognizing this incredible moment, this provision, Abraham names the place. Genesis chapter 22, verse 14 tells us, he calls it YHWH Jireh. Many people know it as Jehovah Jireh.
The Lord will provide. But that name has a deeper layer too, connected to the verb ra, which means to see.
Ah, so Jireh isn't just provide, it's also related to seeing.
Correct. The idea is really inseparable. God sees the need, he sees the faithful heart, and because he sees, he provides. The seeing guarantees the providing. It speaks to God's awareness and readiness.
And that leads to the phrase that apparently became a saying. As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided.
Notice the grammar there. It shall be provided. Yirah. It's passive.
Meaning
the provision is fundamentally God's action. It's not something people achieve or earn. It's something God does on his designated mountain. That statement became a proverb, a lasting reminder of God's sufficiency tied to that specific place.
So the key point here, God sees. God prepares the provision beforehand. And this whole idea of substitution points forward, doesn't it, to something even bigger?
Absolutely. It points to a greater fulfillment yet to come, one that will forever define Mount Moriah. And because Abraham demonstrated this absolute, unwavering allegiance. There's another call from heaven. The angel of the Lord calls a second time. This isn't just repeating the old promises. It's an emphatic renewal, an expansion. It's like God is saying, now that you've proven trustworthy, here's the guaranteed expanded deal. This starts in Genesis chapter 22, verses 15 through 17.
And this renewal comes with the strongest guarantee possible, right? Something completely unbreakable.
The ultimate guarantee. The angel declares, Bidishpati, by myself I have sworn.
God swears by himself.
Exactly. Humans swear by something greater to validate their oath. God, having no one greater, swears by his own unchanging character. He stakes his very being on fulfilling these promises. There's literally no higher certainty possible.
And the text draws a direct line. Because Abraham did this, because he did not withhold his only son, the result is this incredible expansion of the blessings.
Yes, and you can even hear the intensity in the Hebrew phrasing. Bareka varkeka, it means something like, blessing I will bless you, or I will surely bless. It implies abundance, overflowing favor.
Okay.
And then harba arbe, multiply, I will multiply you, or I will surely multiply. It promises descendants beyond counting, using that familiar imagery, as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore.
Which suggests both, like a massive number and maybe different kinds of descendants, heavenly and earthly.
That's a common interpretation, yes, covering both the spiritual and physical lineage in its vastness. And this multiplication promise comes linked with victory.
Right, your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. What does possess the gate mean exactly?
Yarash Sharar. It's a military and civic term. The city gate was the center of power for defense, for legal rulings, for commerce. To possess the gate meant total victory, control, authority over your enemies. It's comprehensive dominance.
But then the promise explodes beyond just Abraham's family or nation. It becomes universal.
It does. And in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. This lifts the whole thing onto a global stage. Abraham's act of faith wasn't just securing his family's future, it was establishing the channel through which God's blessing would eventually reach everyone.
Wow. So Moriah becomes the launch pad for universal hope.
In a very real sense, yes. And the text circles back to the reason for all this confirmation and expansion.
Yeah.
It's all because Abraham Shemata Vikoli, you have obeyed my voice. He heard and he acted. Complete obedience.
So the lesson is, ultimate surrender doesn't lead to ultimate loss, but to ultimate blessing.
Precisely. The very place where Abraham was willing to give up God's greatest gift becomes the place where he receives everything back, amplified, with an expanded, unbreakable covenant. He proved he could be trusted with the full weight of the promises.
Now, for many people listening, the sticking point is still the morality of the test itself. Why would God ask for something so horrific? To really get inside Abraham's head, to understand maybe why he complied so readily, we need to look beyond Genesis for a moment. The New Testament actually gives us a stunning insight.
Yes, Hebrews chapter 11, verses 17 through 19. It's crucial for understanding Abraham's mindset.
What does it say?
It basically reframes Abraham not just as obedient, but as thinking, reasoning, trusting in a very specific way. It says Abraham considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back.
Wait, so Abraham wasn't just thinking, this is terrible, but I have to do it. He was actually thinking about resurrection.
That's what Hebrews suggests. His understanding of God's power and God's faithfulness to his promise was so profound that he reasoned God had to overcome Isaac's death somehow, either by stopping it or by reversing it.
That's incredible. So his trust wasn't just in God's command, but in God's ability to keep his promise despite the command.
Exactly. He trusted God's power to raise the dead more than he feared the finality of the knife. And, as Hebrews says, in a way, figuratively speaking, he did get Isaac back from the dead, snatched from the brink.
Okay, that changes things. And it sets us up for the ultimate connection, the ultimate comparison, doesn't it? This whole test wasn't just about Abraham. It was a foreshadowing. Romans chapter 8, verse 32 really brings it home.
It really does. Romans chapter 8, verse 32 asks this powerful rhetorical question. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things?
He who did not spare his own son.
That's the connection. Abraham was willing not to spare his only son, his Ben Yachid. That willingness becomes this poignant human reflection of what God himself would ultimately do. God did what he only asked Abraham to be willing to do.
God actually went through with it.
He actually gave him up for us all. He provided the ultimate substitutionary sacrifice. So the story of Moriah in the end isn't just about Abraham's incredible faith. It's a profound revelation of God's own heart, his own willingness to pay the ultimate price.
That idea is echoed in John chapter 3, verse 16 too, right? The only son language.
Yes, absolutely. Abraham was prepared to give his only son, and God stopped him. But the comparison highlights that God actually gave his only son for the world. The principle of substitution dramatically shown with the ram caught in the thicket on Mount Moriah.
Finds its real final fulfillment there.
Finds its ultimate fulfillment in the sacrifice of Christ. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide, wasn't just a promise that God would provide something. It pointed towards the staggering truth that God would provide himself as the lamb.
So stepping back from this incredibly intense narrative, this deep dive into Genesis chapter 22 leaves us with some really crucial takeaways, some principles for how we actually navigate this kind of all-demanding relationship with God. First, it seems clear. God sometimes tests the things we treasure most, maybe not always as dramatically, but our careers, our relationships, our security, to make sure that our connection with him stays number one.
That's right. And we saw that real faith, the kind Abraham showed, is defined by trusting God's character, even when his commands seem confusing or completely contradict what we thought he promised. Abraham obeyed what he couldn't fully understand because he relied on who God is.
And that huge principle of provision. God showed he provides a substitute. He asks for our trust, our allegiance, our willingness to surrender. But his goal isn't to leave us destitute. It's about purifying our hearts, not emptying our lives.
Exactly. Which leads to maybe the biggest practical lesson. Learning to live with God means holding everything, blessings, plans, people, achievements, with open hands. Like Abraham, when we're willing to surrender our tightest grip on our treasures.
We find out God himself is the real treasure.
Yes. And that he can be trusted to provide everything we truly need to follow his path for us.
It's an overwhelming story of trust and surrender.
It really is. And maybe a final thought for you to carry away from this deep dive is to reflect on that idea of allegiance in your own life. Is there an area, maybe a goal, a dream, even a relationship that you find yourself holding on to just a little too tightly? Something that might consciously or unconsciously be competing with God for that ultimate place in your heart. This whole story is this powerful invitation to practice that surrender, trusting in that amazing promise from Genesis chapter 22, verse 14. So Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide, as it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided.
The provision is guaranteed.
Why the heart is fully surrendered and God is truly honored. That promise, Jehovah Jireh, still stands over every single challenge of surrender we face.